let's start. Thanks everyone for bearing with me on all of that. This is CFI's mission to protect and preserve Colorado's 14,000-foot peaks through active stewardship and public education. CFI was founded in 1994, so you'll notice that it is our 30th anniversary this year. Woohoo! CFI got started when these founding organizations really saw a need for a group that was just designated to 14ers and 14er preservation. Loretta was in the room when all these people came together to put this organization together. If you want to learn more about CFI's history, there's a really good article out in 5280 right now that has history about CFI that I didn't know, and it's kind of an interesting back story. I got mine at Sprouts, if you want to check it out. The Peak Steward program was started in the year 2000, and we have 5 full-time staff. We have 2 people that work about 9 months out of the year. We've got 32 seasonals hired, and they will be starting in a couple weeks, actually. And then we have about 15 board members. We partner with the Forest Service primarily, meaning Loretta, and we also work with the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, just a little bit, and Youth Corps help us complete a lot of our trail work as well. And then volunteers, lots of volunteers, anywhere from 600 to 1,000 volunteers each season. And Loretta, you've been designing our trails or 14er trails for 35 years?
I have.
That's a good long time. So Loretta designs the trails. She coordinates all of the ecologists to come in and do the environmental assessments, and then also helps us do the cost share agreements between the different Forest Service districts. And she's getting ready to retire, sadly. All right, so CFI is all about building sustainably aligned trails. Most of the trails were, the 14er trails were user created, and that was just somebody going straight up a mountain in most cases. So we closed trails, we build new trails that have been designed, planned, and are a way better hiking experience for everybody. We are going to be back on North Elbert, and for the 4th year of 3 years, we're having a bonus year this year. We'll be back on Black Cloud and Mount Chavano. These are kind of our fixed site crew projects. These folks will generally not work with volunteers. These people have 3 years or more of trail work experience, very technical trail building skills. And then we'll also perform trail maintenance on many of our existing routes with our Adopt a Peak crew on a dozen peaks, and we'll run about 45 to 50 volunteer projects. And then we'll have our Peak Stewards helping with hiker education. Last year we had about 40 individuals, and we attended 32 outreach events. And then we will put our trail counters out. We have 23, no, is it 23? Yeah, 23 trail counters monitoring hiking use on 21 peaks. We also dabble a little bit in land acquisition. We own the summit of Mount Chavano, and we're just general advocates for public land access. So here's a look at hiking use, and I just wanted to bring this up to talk about why we're here, because there's a lot of people out there hiking. We will likely release 2023 data this July or August. It usually comes out, and these numbers can increase or decrease from year to year based on a variety of factors like late season snow. People just can't get out there until July. Pandemic related craziness. These numbers have gone up to 415,000. Laundry having parking restrictions and fees. Now, those numbers were cut in half in recent years. We're seeing close to 40,000 people hiking there at the height. And then, different closures like Democrat and Bross being closed. So these numbers do fluctuate, but even in a down year, there are still a lot of people hiking 14ers. And it shows in the resource damage. And so that's why we have Peak Stewards. Peak Stewards help us educate hikers about Leave No Trace on busy 14ers. They also attend outreach events for us. Peak Stewards are CFI ambassadors. They can range in age from 9 to 85, and it's usually just people from a variety of backgrounds and career paths, and just a very diverse group of people. Then I'm going to let Vaughn jump in and talk about Leave No Trace.
Okay, once again, my name's Vaughn Campbell. I'm not going to really get into too much depth on the Leave No Trace principles. We kind of want to focus on how, the impact of Leave No Trace is really the mountains are being used so much right now that we really have to abide by Leave No Trace. And it's pretty much the guide for us as peak stewards as far as how we plan our day and our job. Always recommend, if you can, to take the Leave No Trace awareness course. It is out there. And just to kind of let you know, the first one on planning ahead and preparing, hikers need to know the route that they're going to be on, the times that they should be starting. Preparation doesn't start when you get to the trailhead. Oftentimes some people may think that, but it's not necessarily the case. Travel and camp on durable surfaces. One of the things we recommend that sometimes the hikers that are new are not aware of is that you need to stay on the trail. And that means if it's muddy, you still need to be on that trail, because oftentimes hikers with good intentions think that, well, if I go off trail, I won't make that mud part of the main trail any worse. When in fact, what they're doing is creating a new trail, which we really don't want. Disposing of waste properly, focusing on wag bags for humans and poop bags for dogs. I'll get into a little bit more on dogs of what's going on there, and just really trash all over the place. I always carry a trash bag with me. I was on Mount Sherman a few years ago and looked like there had been a party out there, and proceeded to clean up probably 40 pounds of broken beer bottles. It took like a couple years to get that done. So I always carry a trash bag around with me. Leave what you find. There's a lot of times people want to bring rocks down with them as a souvenir. I know like Antero has quartz rocks. They want to bring those down. We've even seen people come down with flowers in their hair, or a big bunch of flowers. Well, we kind of want to avoid that. So leave what you have there. Minimizing the campfire impacts. You kind of want to emphasize, if they are camping there, just to kind of restore what they had. We don't want a big area that's all charred. It's just kind of what it says, minimize the impact of the campfire. Respecting wildlife, always recommend don't touch or feed the animals. I remember summiting Harvard once, and there was a marmot up there, and you could just tell that he charges admission once he gets to the top, because it looked like everybody had been feeding him, and he knew the whole routine. He just hung out waiting on food. Be considerate of others. Oftentimes I'll hear when I'm stewarding, I can hear music and coming from somewhere, and people have a tendency these days to want other people to hear their music. So we kind of recommend don't have your boombox going, and just a right of way going up and down the mountain is imperative. Next slide. Anna.
Hannah, you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Alex.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I definitely know these principles inside and out if you don't know them well. And I'm going to be taking a L&T trainer course next weekend. That's 2 days. I don't think that you can overlearn this information. So definitely familiarize yourself with this. There's free courses on their website. This Peak Steward training used to be 2 days, and you became an L&T trainer afterward. And I really wanted to make this as accessible to everyone as possible. I think we can all be stewards of our land, and it shouldn't have to take 2 days, but it's only going to help you the more information you can kind of arm yourself with as you're out there as a steward. All right, next slide. Vaughn, you want to jump in?
Oops. The typical day on a 14er, we want people to pick a peak is going to be the first thing you do. We kind of recommend the busier peaks. You can do any of them that you want. But the busier peaks like Bierstadt, Grays and Torreys, Sherman, DeCalibron, those are the ones that are highly visited. And oftentimes those are the ones where you have the beginners that are climbing. So it's you can make a lot of contacts on those locations, but as I said, we can do all of them. The uniform, I always wear like a green shirt and some khaki pants. I'll have my backpack with me with first aid kit, whistle, InReach Mini, those sort of things, kind of demonstrating the lead by example. I'll have a hat on, my badge on. I carry a clipboard around because it looks like I'm official, even though I'm probably not. Also, I have the clickers. I have the little clicker I got from Amazon for like $2, which does a great job. Some people may want to use an app. For me, just using the clicker works well. And then another thing I've started bringing with me just for the heck of it is a pair of binoculars. And that way you can kind of look up the trail and see, how busy it is, just to kind of gauge on what's going on up the trail during the day. Arriving early, I usually get there between 5 or 6 a.m. Some people, some stewards are going to hike the 14er. They may do a sunrise hike and start making contacts on the way down. You do see a lot of people who are the sunrise summiters. So they're getting up there and they're at the summit during sunrise. And another thing, you're going to set up at the trailhead, like I said, between 5 to 6, I would say at the latest. And what I'll do is as I'm driving up to the trailhead, I'll start my car count then. Because a lot of times for Bierstadt, for an example, cars are already start heading down the hill parking. And so it's better if you can start clicking your counter as you're getting close to the trailhead, because we do want that count of cars when you've arrived and when you've departed. Talking to climbers, we'll get into that a little bit more in a little bit later. The one thing I do is while I'm talking to them, I look them over, see if they've got, the equipment that they need, that they're not wearing, Crocs. Mary and I were on Sherman once, and a person, this was like late September, there was already some snow on the ground, and she was wearing Crocs. And we kind of, we're not an enforcement agency, so we can only make recommendations. But we kind of said, hey, that those things may not work for you. And lo and behold, in about 20 minutes, She turned around and said, "You're right." So kind of looking them over, I'll always ask, is this your first 14er, to get the conversation started? Where are you from? Normally we talk to them for like maybe 1 to 2 minutes max. I won't say, do I have 1 or 2 minutes of your time? I'll just make sure I am respectful of their time. You're always going to have the people that are looking away, or they try to rush past you. I just let it happen. Filling out and submitting the log, I always try to submit a log, fill it out what I can ahead of time. As soon as I arrive, there's some things that you can pre-fill out. And then I'll submit the log as soon as I get home from doing my steward duty. And once again, doing the cars as you're coming in, and the cars when you're getting ready to depart. You do want to complete 4 days of service a season. You can always do more. I prefer doing them on weekends just because that's when you're going to make the most contacts. But you can also do weekdays. It's really up to you. Saturday is usually the busiest day as far as the recording purposes on the number of people that are hiking up the mountains. But we do want to discuss leave no trace, dogs on leash, when they should be summiting. I know there's discussion between, should we be summiting at 10 a.m.? Should we be summiting by noon, or be off the summit by noon? And then just kind of knowing the route, which I'll get into more. And then we talk about if you do want to hike, after you've had a discussion, by all means. What I've done before is hiked up part way and then come down and talk to people who I have not made contact with. So next slide. Hannah?
I'll just add too that there really is no set number of hours you need to be out there. I just want to emphasize that. But try to go at the ideal time when you're going to hit all of those hikers at the trailhead, and you're not showing up at 2 or 3 p.m. and talk to 5 people as they're on their way to their car or something. So there's a very efficient way to do this. If you want to go out for 2 hours and talk to 100 people, it's very, very possible to do in a short amount of time. And then I'll also follow up with the priority peaks for the season, where we're going to have CFI crews, and also just these front range busy 14ers.
And
Okay,
what
next,
I do normally on a day is, like I said, I'll arrive between 5 or 6 a.m. and I'll hang out doing discussions with, making contacts, and then maybe at around, I don't know, 9 o'clock, when it starts slowing down the number of people showing up, I'll go up the mountain a ways, and like I said, turn around and work my way back down and talk to people. But really, it's kind of up to you.
Yeah,
So,
people do this in a variety of ways, and we want you to find the way that works for you, is what it comes down to.
okay, so here's the Peak Steward log. If you haven't seen it before, you can fill it out. Really, the easiest way is just go down there in the bottom and fill it out online. Like I said, I fill out what I can ahead of time before I even show up. Really, that top part, kind of plugging in the weather as you arrive, any additional peak stewards, the trailheads. And like I said, I use a clicker. You can use an app as far as keeping count. Some of these other categories here, like dogs, I'll just put a tick mark down, and whether they were on leash or not on a leash. Hannah and I were discussing yesterday kind of what is a contact versus what isn't. And really, it's just kind of having a meaningful conversation with the hiker. If you're discussing leave no trace, if you're talking about Colorado 14ers initiative, a little bit, here's what the trail is, how high the mountain is, those sort of things. So not just saying, well, I hope you have a good day. That's really, we don't look at that as being a contact itself.
And contacts really help us measure the success of this program. It's very different than trail work, where we can show these before and after photos. Whereas with Peak Stewards, what we have is how many people did you talk to? And so the most important information to collect is going to be the contacts, just how many people you talked to while you were out there. I read every single one of these, and I also look at the additional comments and trail conditions. I get Peak Steward reports all the time that say there were 3 downed trees, this far up the trail, and I'm like, hey, we have a crew going there next week, and I'll tell them to bring a saw. So there really isn't information that isn't useful to put on here, but at the bare minimum, getting those contact numbers is the most important part, and really why you're out there as a steward. I've gotten Peak Steward logs that come back that have contacts as 0, and that to me isn't really a Peak Steward day, because you're there to contact hikers. So definitely make that #1 priority while you are out.
And I think that's another question sometimes stewards have is there's a block there that says unprepared for the mountain environment. And I would say a good example is just what I kind of told you about the hiker that was going up in a pair of Crocs, or if somebody's going up and doesn't have any water with them at all, or just one water bottle. It's really kind of subjective as far as what you think, unprepared means. I'm not sure if somebody who's leaving to head up the mountain at 12 p.m. is prepared. Personally, I would think that the preparation that they did ahead of time wasn't very much. But once again, it's subjective.
Definitely. Like, I know that all this information is an estimate, so you don't need to write like about, or even like, it's really helpful if you just record one number. If you write like 10 to 15 in the day hikers, I have to go through and manually edit all those numbers when I export into Excel and compile this information. So it's really helpful to me if you just make your best guess and put one whole number on the log. And it is, it's not a perfect science. And so do your best with all of this. I know that it can be tedious counting cars off the trailheads, but we do look at the information. So it's helpful. It's all helpful. Next slide, Vaughn.
Yep. So really, this gets a little bit more in depth as far as the conversations that we have with the hikers. The first thing is I always introduce myself. I say I'm with Colorado 14ers Initiative. We conduct the trail maintenance and also education on the mountains. Again, you want to respect the people's time. So I usually limit it to 1 to 2 minutes. You may go a little bit more or a little bit less. As far as benefit of the doubt, we do want to have positive intent with people, and I keep reminding myself of that all of the time. We want to stay positive with them, and a lot of times we need to remember that we're not an enforcement agency, that we can make recommendations, but we're not like park rangers or anything like that. So just stay positive in your conversations. We want to relate and build rapport with them, find out a little bit about them. I remember one of the first years I was out was right around the COVID time, and people from all over the nation were showing up. It seemed like a unique situation, but find out about them, show that you care, and just kind of build rapport with them, say hello to their dog or whatever. Body language, I do look at them, each person I'm talking about, try to be direct and impartial. If there's a group of 3 or 4 people, some people may not want to talk, that's fine. The body language, you're always going to see people that come walking by with their head down, and that's going to happen, and it's okay. We're not going to be able to make 100% contact, but I think a lot of times you'll see, I just don't take it personally when they come walking by and they look like they're on a mission. To educate and provoke, really, that's kind of why we're here, talking about the leave no trace. I get into conversations with, how tall the 14er is. There's a book out there now on 14ers on how they were named. May kind of let them know, how did this mountain get its name? What the route is. Most of the people, they'll want to know, they should have a good idea what the route is, but like Bierstadt, you can stay there and kind of point out that you're going to go stay to the right of the lake, things like that. You know, the weather that's going on, always recommend, you know, keep looking up. I had a tendency always on climbing a lot of mountains is look at the next step, where I should be looking at the weather, because as we all know, sometimes you can look up and the weather changes in no time. Offer alternatives. You know, you can always tell somebody that they don't have to summit. The mountain's not going anywhere. And some of the people that show up I've had before where they don't really want to go to the summit. They just want to go hike for a ways and turn around and come back. But you know, it's in when people come down, I always kind of, if they didn't summit, I still am going to have a conversation with them, say, hey, you know, you can do it another day. Congratulations on going as far as you did. Modeling behavior, you know, if we're hiking as far as a steward, we want to make sure we're emulating what we should be doing, meaning staying on the trail. We're not littering. We've packed the correct things that we need. I'm always carrying the pack with me. And then emphasizing their influence. You know, as a hiker, you look at Bierstadt now, I've been up there where there's, you know, on a Saturday where there's 800 people going up the mountain. It just looks like a big trail of ants heading up. Just the sheer numbers makes it almost imperative that people are abiding by leave no trace. I was happy last year when I was on Bierstadt that I really didn't see as much trash as I'd seen in prior years. But just letting them know that their influence, you know, that the steward influences the hiker and the hikers can influence other hikers, just as far as leaving no trace and taking care of our mountains. Next slide.
Yeah, occasionally I'll try to get people to tell me why they're there in their own words, and I think that it helps create in their mind a connection to the place. And when people are connected to a place, they're more likely to take care of it. And so just kind of forcing them to stop and think about why they're there, I think has some benefits to it.
Yep.
Hannah, you have the hand raised?
Yeah. I
Oh.
can't see any questions or anything. Is it
But-
a question or?
The hand went down, so maybe you answered it. Okay.
Okay.
I see somebody has their hand up.
Yes, Hannah, it's
Yeah.
Peter. Vaughn, you made a point that it hit home for me last year with the first experience I had as a steward, and I was being mentored that morning. The most uncomfortable part of it for me was that hiker that you described with his or her head down, not wanting to stop. And it was uncomfortable for me because my sense was I was supposed to find a way to stop that hiker to engage. So it's very helpful for you to say, you don't have to stop everybody. That was not being a salesperson and being an introvert. That was, and I've spent this year trying to figure out how am I going to get to those people, but that's very helpful what you said.
Yeah, I've had difficulty sometimes where I'm talking to 3 or 4 people and you see another person walking behind them and just taking off. It's not that easy. I just understand that I can't make contact with 100% of the people. You can try, but it just usually doesn't work.
Great point.
So dogs on 14ers, it can be a controversy. That's my dog Glacier. It's interesting. I've taken him with me. Speaking of contacts, and we've been at a trailhead, and if I would be by myself, nobody would want to talk with me. But if I've got Glacier with me, then everybody wants to talk to me. So he's pretty cool looking little guy. But dogs can be a sensitive situation. The first thing I always do is thank the hiker if they have a dog, that they've got that dog on a leash, or politely asking somebody to leash up their dogs. And we just kind of need to explain why, how the dogs impact the marmots and the pika up there, the flora by running off the trails, and really just dogs impacting other dogs. You know, somebody may be taking their dog up the mountain. It's like, I have the friendliest, nicest dog on the face of the earth. And then they get involved with another dog, and, you know, we don't have the ability to hose them down. And other hikers, you know, you may love dogs like crazy, but that's another hiker may not want that dog rushing them, especially if they're on a trail and at elevation. I always say the hiker is responsible for getting the dog back down the mountain. We do have slings out there that if a dog is injured, you know, I always remember if you're taking a dog up the mountain with you, you should be able to get the dog back down the mountain. So have slings, the booties. You know, these dogs can injure their paws easily just by the sheer being on the rocks all the time. I've seen a lot of dogs with their paws bleeding. So booties, does the dog have water? Does it have food? Oftentimes we're thinking about, well, I've got to make sure I've got all my food, all my water. Years ago, I had a golden retriever, and he carried his own backpack with his own food and water, and he loved it. And once again, it can be difficult discussions because you are talking to members of families. And people consider their dog a member of their family. So if you're saying, you know, please leash up your dog, they may take offense to that. So once again, it's a sensitive situation, a sensitive conversation. The dog poop bags, that can become a big discussion, which I'll get into in a second. Hannah, do you have anything on dogs?
Yeah, I was just gonna add that these are really difficult. I'm just gonna emphasize, I added a page to the Peak Steward manual this year just because of the problems that or just struggle that I've seen between crew members and hikers, peak stewards and hikers over this specific topic. So I added a page this year that's reasons to leash a dog to sort of help guide those discussions. But just also know that you're not going to change everybody's mind, and some people aren't going to listen to you. And that is okay. You can let those people walk away. You don't need to push it. You don't need to force them to put their dog on a leash. Just keep it positive. I like to think of this situation as planting a seed in their mind. So if I tell them to leash their dog, sure, maybe they don't listen to me that day, but maybe somebody a little bit higher up on the mountain tells them to leash their dog. And then maybe the next time they go out, they run into a peak steward. And it's like eventually, maybe at some point, they're going to get tired of people telling them to do this all the time. Maybe they'll do it. So that's how I like to see this specific topic and think about it. But it is one of the more difficult topics or conversations to have.
And we have seen an increase on search and rescue being asked to help dogs out and bringing dogs down. And really that takes away for their responsibility of other things that they should be doing.
Yeah, the number of lost dog posters that I've seen at 14er trailheads because dogs started chasing wildlife. There's a lot of good reasons to leash a dog. So definitely important.
Hey, Hannah, if I can jump in, there's
Yeah.
two things I do with dogs. First of all, I always tell people, how about just put it on a leash above tree line? Because below tree line, it's not that big a deal.
Yep.
And then the second one is, especially on Yale, as you point out, I'm always on Yale. Last half mile of Yale is not dog friendly at all. So I always tell people you may consider just going to the saddle and turning around, because there's been a lot of dogs injured in that last half mile. So I try to point out the bad points.
Hannah,
That's a
this is
great
Teresa.
point.
This is Teresa, and
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, or Loretta, or any of the members that are today here, if you had heard the new plan that the Forest Service has for the Blue Lakes area and also Snef Falls that will be implemented in the summer of 2025, where dogs will not be allowed to be in that area. Have
Oh,
you
wow.
heard anything about that?
Yeah, right now that whole plan for the Blue Lakes area is in the NEPA process, so the National Environmental Policy Act analysis process, and is open for public comments. So who knows if that will continue to be a part of that plan? But I do think that it's a good reminder for people that if we keep our dogs on a leash, we won't see as much elimination of dogs from trail systems as we might see if we continue to see, impacts to sensitive species like bighorn and ptarmigan.
It's really interesting. Thanks for
Hey,
sharing.
Hannah, this is Brian. Just another
Yeah.
question, a quick comment on the dogs.
Mhm.
Kind of ties into the dog rescue that's been happening out there. Dogs suffer from altitude sickness just like we do. The difference is dogs can't articulate it to us, and they don't show signs of it early on. It's like when they have it, they hit the wall, and they literally will just sit down. So that's one of the challenges that we face, and that you really got to know your dog if you're going to take them up to the top of these peaks, and it can create problems for inexperienced people with their dogs on the mountain with them.
Great point, Brian. I think people don't think about having to carry their dog down potentially, especially for really, really big dogs. This may not just be possible. I know another steward, the reason she became a steward was the first time she ever climbed a 14er, she went up Quandary, and somebody had a giant German Shepherd that got into some sort of an accident or altitude sickness, and it had to be carried down, and she helped carry the dog down, and that was her motivation to become a Peak Steward. So yeah, all interesting points, and there's so much to say on this topic. I feel like we could spend 2 hours on dogs on 14ers, because it's interesting, and there are a lot of feelings and interactions. Even me personally, I've had bad interactions with people on this topic. So
And we've started discussing this at the presentations at REI. And I'll ask a show of hands of how many people are planning on taking their dogs with them. And if you think about it, people attending these classes, or some of them have never climbed a 14er before. So if they're worrying about climbing a 14er themselves and how they're going to act at altitude, and then you've got to add a dog onto that, it could be a difficult situation.
yeah.
Hannah, this is Charles.
Yeah.
I want to go back to something Vaughn said earlier about unprepared hikers. I've worked on trail maintenance for a couple of years now, so I'm up on the trail, high up, all day long, and I see everybody going up and down who goes past. And I've seen an awful lot, high percentage of people who just have a t-shirt and shorts on, and maybe one person in the group has a very small backpack. So I know they don't have multiple layers. They're not prepared for weather, and their footwear is street shoe type wear, and they're halfway up the 14er. What do you do with people like this at the trailhead?
Well, I think that's when you should be talking to them, is at the trailhead. And I mean, you could almost say, well, you're not planning on going all the way up today, are you? In a polite way, because I agree. I've seen that before also, where they have one water bottle, and you're going to see sometimes, I mean, the first 14er I ever went up was Pikes Peak Ascent, and I ran up it. And you'll see some trail runners, but you kind of know the difference when you see them, because they're taking off running. But I agree. I mean, and you can't really tell them no, but it's another sensitive conversation.
Yeah, I think just advise and provide information, even if that's about the weather, or that it's windy up there, or it might rain later. Just present the information, and it's up to them to make the decision. We can't hold people there. We can't tell them that, you know, they're going to get trouble if they continue. So it's just putting the information out there and hoping that maybe the next time they're out there, they'll bring more water or whatever it is. But yeah, also a tough situation.
Okay, so steward hacks, the first one's talking about carrying an empty jar. We recommend, or I recommend, taking a Pringles can. You can put the dog poop in the dog poop bag and put that in the Pringles can, and it doesn't mess up your backpack as much. I've been on Bierstadt in prior years where it's like you can almost figure out the entire way to the summit just by following the dog poop bags. And I think a lot of times the people have every intention of disposing it when they come back down, but so often they don't do so. So just a Pringles bag or a empty jar, I think helps a lot. Bringing a camp stove for yourself. A lot of times I get there and it's like, well, gosh, it's going to be 80 degrees and I show up and it's cold. So I bring a little camp stove and I'll have some coffee in the morning. I've even hiked on after I've made contacts at Sherman, has gone up to the saddle and had some made some coffee up at the saddle. Use the counter app or the clicker. I already talked about that before. It makes life a lot easier. Camping the night beforehand, I would especially recommend this on peaks like Grays and Torreys, where it fills up for the next day. It fills up the night prior. I always am going to spend the night at Grays and Torreys, the parking area. Plus, the parking area is so limited there. Sherman's another one I've seen that fills up a lot. Learning about the local flora and fauna, you can never learn enough about that. I mean, I've been in the mountains really since '87, and last year was the first time I saw a moose, and it was on Bierstadt. Mary O'Malley told me there's moose there all the time. Never believed her. But really just the pika and the marmots and all the animals, and we'll get into the flora and the alpine environment here in a little bit. Knowing the route beforehand, I think, to me, this is very important because I think it ties into the credibility of CFI. We should know the route. You know, it's not mandatory that you've climbed the mountain if you're going to Peak Steward at that location, but I would highly recommend it because so often hikers going to ask, so what is the route, or how, you know, what's your recommendation going up the mountain? So I always kind of recommend having hiked that mountain that you're going to be Peak Stewarding on. The other one, looking up forest regulations for the area. You know, there may be regulations as far as some of the mountains, as far as how many are allowed in the group. Are there only 15 that are allowed in the group? And you see a bus show up with 50 to 150 people. We were talking yesterday about drones on the mountain. If you see things like this, or large groups of 100 people, you know, get the name of the group and maybe share that with the district and the rangers, just so they've got some information that maybe they want to make a contact with that group.
Yeah, you can share it on your Peak Steward report, and I'll get in touch with Loretta about it. We've compiled a list of links for Forest Service information because it's different wherever you go. And some of the wilderness group size limits are 10, like Vaughn said, to 15. And some places you can have 100 people out there in your group legally. So it does change, and you're really the authority on the mountain to some extent. So it's helpful to know what the rules and regulations for that area say. If there are fire bans, is also a really good thing to know. So yeah, definitely look into this type of information, and I'll provide links of where to find this.
I know when I've had some contact with large groups of people, I've always wanted to kind of touch bases with whoever was leading the group also, just so kind of get a feeling for what they're doing. Are they going to stay together? Are they going to have somebody stay with those people who are having a difficult time getting up? Telling somebody to turn around if they need to in their group, those sort of things. And by the way, Hannah forced us to put this picture up of Mary.
This is the realtor pose of Vaughn
Yeah,
and Mary
excellent.
O'Malley that I love. And I encourage you to pair up with a mentor. It's so helpful to go out with somebody that's been doing this for a while. It helps you build confidence. You can see their spiel. And it's fun. It's more fun to go out with another person. When there's two of you out there too, it just gives you a little more, I don't know, credibility maybe, or you can kind of attract people a little bit more. You both have uniforms on. People tend to listen when you're paired up just a little bit better. So definitely check out the calendar when I send you links to that. There are 2 dates, mentor dates already on the calendar with Terry Madison, who has been a Peak Steward since 2015. They're June 23rd at Bierstadt and July 7th. I'm going to reach out to the other returning stewards and ask them to put some mentor days on the calendar so we can get lots more of those in June. And some stewards go through and they'll put all 4 of their dates on the calendar right now, and then they'll commit to those dates. Other people wake up in the morning or the night before and they say, I want to go Peak Steward today. So it's totally up to you, but I encourage you to check the calendar. Otherwise we end up with, 4 or 5 people on Bierstadt in the same day and nobody there, the next day. So it's important to check it, and also returning stewards, please add those dates so that people can pair up with you. This is a very self-led volunteering, and so it takes some initiative on your part to get yourself out there and help get yourself up to speed with a mentor. And the calendar is on our website, and I will send links to all of this information. And you basically just enter your name and where you're going and what date and what time and how somebody else could get in touch with you, or any other relevant information, like I'm going to show up at 6, I'll be there for 2 hours, or I plan to summit after 2 hours. So definitely use that. We also are setting up a Facebook page this year, and I'm going to let Alex just talk about that because he's been the big motivator behind this, and he'll be moderating the page.
Yeah. So, again, I'm Alex, and I will be monitoring and helping set up this Facebook page. And I'll tell you from the get-go, my reasons for setting this up are entirely selfish. I have had just the greatest of time getting to know many people within the CFI space. And I think one of the things that I've been excited to sort of do is set up some happy hours and bring together that community within the Peak Stewards as well. So obviously the task at hand, Peak Stewarding, it's either you or maybe one other person. So it can get a little lonely out there sometimes. And this Facebook page is designed to build a community among stewards. So we'll use this. Obviously, you can put your stewarding dates on the calendar, but also on the Facebook page to try and get partners, those kinds of things. We will be trying to put together some happy hours throughout the summer. And then I have also, and I don't know if I've talked to Hannah about this, but I've been toying around with the idea of trying to put together a camping trip where we would all, go camp together and then go out to do our respective stewarding days for a weekend. So the page is not entirely set up yet, but look for details for that so that we can, grow together as a community of mountain people, if you will.
Thanks, Alex. That's awesome. I'm really excited about this because we tried to do a Slack last year, and I think people just use Facebook a little more, and we just want to help facilitate conversation and it's a place for you to share pictures and just connect and use it like you would a calendar. I'm going to try to check both. And so if you want to add dates to the Facebook and you don't want to add them to the calendar, we can use them kind of interchangeably, and I'll keep my eye on them. And I would love to do the camping idea. I think that's great. I'd love to do it maybe when we're doing a big trail project too, and just kind of make it a whole event. But I really want to bring people together more with the Peak Steward program. It is so independent, but people become best friends doing it. So all the more reason to facilitate these days together and spend time connecting. Awesome. All right.
Hannah,
Material. Yes.
I feel really old saying this, but just keep in mind that everybody doesn't have Facebook.
Definitely. And I don't have Facebook, Joan. I'm a bad millennial. I haven't had Facebook in, I don't know, it's been maybe 10 years at this point. So if Facebook is not your thing, that's fine. I'll just ask you to use the calendar, and I will still try to, in my monthly emails that I send out, or 3-week emails that I send out to everyone, I'll try to announce any events and any opportunities. So we'll make sure you get the information if you're not on Facebook. I get it. I'm always out of the loop because I'm not on Facebook. So we'll fix that. Okay, material. So we want you to be armed with some information about CFI. We have these little, they're maybe 2 inches. Don't Just Summit Give Back cards. It basically just has CFI's website in there with a pretty photo and how you can get involved. We give these to people who say, how do I donate? How do I volunteer? We also have Leave No Trace cards. Sometimes I'll give these to folks when they aren't following Leave No Trace, and it's just Alpine specific Leave No Trace that is a kind of a cheat sheet for you, but also provides people with information. These are great for kids too. And then we like to give everyone a name tag and a hat so you look official. So I will order name tags for everyone, and then I will get them to you either at field training if you plan to come to field training, or we'll schedule some pickup days here at the office in Golden, or I will mail this kind of thing to you. So we'll get it to you one way or another. And outreach events. We have some Peak Stewards that just do outreach events. They don't want to contact people at trailheads. They want to go present. They want to do table opportunities, volunteer fairs, that kind of thing. I will put these opportunities out there and let you know as I hear of them. But if you hear of opportunities at your workplace or your child's school, let me know and I will make it happen. I'll give you all the materials you need, annual reports, stickers, and we'll get you set up to do outreach events. Vaughn and Mary are doing REI classes. It's like how to hike a 14er in partnership with CFI. And they get to talk about CFI's mission, but also how to prepare yourself to go out and climb one of these. So we're doing those in the Springs and at Denver REI, and hopefully we'll get some more locations going with those. So if this is your preferred avenue, let me know. And I will reach out with opportunities as I see them as well. And then please take pictures while you're out there. This helps us get funding for the program. We can show people that you're out there doing stuff. This is a great example of a photo. Here's Margaret Turner. She's got her name tag on and her hat. She looks like she is teaching these people what they need to know. And it's displaying more of the Peak Steward than the hikers. We have permission to use Margaret's photo. We don't really have permission to use these hikers photo, and sometimes, you know, there's youth in the photos and we don't want to use those photos. So, but pictures are really, really helpful. Also accept selfies or just buddy shots too. But number one is Peak Steward in action. So definitely try to get those while you're out. Okay, we have a ton of resources, and I'll email all of this to you with handbook, the Peak Steward log, the priority peaks, the link to the calendar. CFI has a ton of YouTube videos about everything, what to pack, altitude sickness. Loretta made this minimum impact on 14ers. It's basically alpine, leave no trace, that's very specific. The Leave No Trace course online, there's a great National Association for Interpretation. If you're somebody that really, really wants to get more involved with outdoor ed, this is a great course. And then next steps, I'll send that follow-up email with all the information and where you can find it. Feel free to join field training on June 15th. Loretta will be there. Carrie will be there, who is the LNT advocate for the state of Colorado. Mary O'Malley will be there. She was our 2020 Peak Steward of the Year. And she's just very well connected with the climbing community, and we'll actually do some of this hiker engagement, and it's 4 hours and we're not rushing to fit everything in. So definitely join that. And if not, definitely join a mentor date. And then the next best option would be to pair up with another unexperienced steward. Sometimes two people that are unexperienced or new peak stewards can kind of figure it out together. So that will be kind of next. And then we just have to wait for the snow to melt, because there is so much snow up there right now. And I know we're all really excited to get out there, and I'm going to get on ordering the name tags and getting all of your materials to you so that when the snow does melt, we can all be ready to go. All right, so we are behind here, and I want to give Loretta some time. So I'm going to have Loretta get her presentation going, and it's about 11:30. I think we'll go over as far as alpine ecology. So if you have to go at any point, I will just let you know that this is being recorded, and so you can watch it later. We'll also do questions at the end for anyone that can stay. And yeah.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Loretta McEllhiney. Again, I'm the Colorado 14ers Program Manager, and I've been doing this for a long time, and my passion really has become alpine ecology. And I think it's really important that we really understand the alpine when we're talking to visitors about what they can do to help take care of this harsh yet beautiful environment. You know, the combination of the heavy snowfall, the bitter winds, the low temperatures, and the mountainous topography makes the alpine the most severe climate in the world. The plants and animals who inhabit this ecosystem have been rigorously selected and have adapted to survive in this environment. Much of my presentation focuses on these adaptations. I'm going to run through it pretty quick today so we don't go too far over. I hope, though, that you find this as interesting as I do. So we've talked about Colorado's 14ers being a magnet for recreational use, not only from people in the US, but from around the world. They're relatively easy mountains to climb when you compare them to a lot of other mountains. We have a large majority of the 14ers, which are class 1 and 2 hike ups. So many, if not most, of the visitors to this sensitive habitat don't know how sensitive it is, and just how a few footprints on a plant can destroy the beauty that they've come to enjoy. If we're going to change those behavior patterns, we need to educate. And the agency doesn't do a good job at that. So I've spent my career in the alpine, and I know that most people are receptive to learning about the alpine. They don't mean to impact the area, they just don't understand it or how their actions can help to protect it or destroy it. And my hope is that every individual, whoever hears any of my presentations, will take one thing from it and share it with someone, anyone, and you guys have the best opportunity by being peak stewards. So to get to the alpine, you must climb a mountain. So let's take a journey up the mountains and through Colorado's 5 elevational life zones. We'll start at Colorado's lowest point at 3,317 feet above sea level. That's where the Oricary River flows into northwest corner of Kansas, out of Yuma County, Colorado, and into Cheyenne County, Kansas, in the grasslands life zones. Grasslands are usually below 5,600 feet in elevation, and sometimes it's broken into grasslands in eastern Colorado and the semi-desert shrublands of western Colorado. We head up I-70 through Genesee, where we move into the foothills, which are about 6,000 to 7,000 feet above sea level. And we recognize that it's slightly cooler and moister with a larger diversity of habitats. That life zone is sometimes broken into the foothill mountains or foothill forests in eastern Colorado and the pinyon juniper lands in western Colorado. The temperatures continue to cool as we head towards Silverthorne, which is in the montane life zone, somewhere between 6,000 and 9,000 feet. The dominant tree species in those areas are ponderosa, blue spruce. A lot of people don't know that blue spruce can't grow up in the semi-alpine areas. They can't grow above 9,000 feet. And it's our state tree. So Doug fir, limber pine are also common in that area. And lodgepole pine and aspen forests are going to thrive in those areas that were burned over during the mining boom of the 1880s to 1920s. And now we're entering that subalpine life zone from 9,000 to 11,500 feet above sea level. As we pass through Leadville, where dark green spires cover the landscape, and right now it is dumping snow. I'm sure Jim is seeing the same thing in Buena Vista right now. Engelmann spruce, subalpine fir, bristlecone pine, limber pine, lodgepole, and then we're heading up towards timberline, where the mean July temperature is 50 degrees. We travel through the Krummholz, which is the German word for crooked wood. Those are those slow growing asymmetrical trees that often experience great longevity. Some of the timberline bristlecones on Mount Blue Sky are known to be more than 1,500 years old. So put on your jacket because we're heading into the alpine between 11,500 feet and 14,437.6 feet in altitude, where we'll spend the rest of our time together. Colorado's highest point is the summit of Mount Elbert at an elevation of 14,437.6 feet above sea level. Yep, the elevation's changed again. So as technology advances, we are finding new elevations for our mountains on a regular basis. So they're using a couple of the high technology LiDAR and high resolution geoid models of the Earth field to convert the ellipsoidal heights into the orthometric heights, or the height above sea level that we're pretty much used to hearing. So the combination of this is going to be used in the upcoming modernization of the National Spatial Reference System, And we can expect our mountains elevations to continue to adjust. So sometimes it's easier to look at pictures. You can see that on eastern and western Colorado's, there are different vegetation types. So although there are only 5 life zones in Colorado, Colorado is home to approximately 60 different ecological systems, which are really the assemblages of the plants and or animals of a community that occur together on the landscape and are tied together by similar ecological processes. If you can join us for our training on Pikes Peak on July 20th, we are going to really be focusing that training on alpine ecology. I can introduce you to some of the ecological systems and those microclimates that exist in the alpine. We'll look at some of the paraglacial structures that are caused by the frost actions during the glaciated times, and we'll even show you several of the plants that are endemic to Pikes Peak, meaning they grow there and nowhere else in the world. It is a magical place to learn about the alpine. We are limiting that class, so sign up early. So this is a great graphic representation of Colorado. You'll see in here that we've got Grand Junction off to the west and Burlington off to the east. And with the increase in elevation, we see a significant decrease in temperatures. Typically, that's 3 to 5 degrees Fahrenheit per 1,000 feet of elevation gain. And it really depends on the atmospheric conditions. So when it is sunny out, there is greater temperature loss than when it is actually cloudy or snowing like it is right now. In addition, our precipitation increases, and this all leads to a short growing season, usually 30 to 60 days, depending, or it's 30 to 90 days, sorry, depending on that year. So we all know that our climate is changing. This is a graphic illustration of the potential impacts of the predicted 6.3 degrees Fahrenheit increase and the 10% precipitation increase that we are looking at happening in the next decade. You can see that the alpine will move quite a ways up the mountain, further shrinking this ecosystem. So I like I stated before, the alpine areas are the most severe climates in the world, and yet life survives. The alpine life zone makes up 3% of Colorado's landmass, about 1% of the landmass in the contiguous 48 states, and 3% of global land surface. And so, you know, when we're talking about the changes of climate change to the alpine and the shrinking, we're going to be seeing less than 1% very soon of the landmass in the contiguous US being alpine. So the alpine is beautiful, but it can be really harsh. There's high winds. Winds have been recorded at over 200 miles per hour, and 75-mile-per-hour gusts are pretty common, especially in those afternoon thunderstorms. There's low effective precipitation. You saw in the graph that I showed earlier that with elevation increases, precipitation also increases, but we've got wind, and most of that precipitation comes down as snow. And so basically it's getting blown off those mountains. Watch over the winter and you'll see this effect. And I can tell you as an old-time Leadvilleite that the snow is not melting in the middle of winter. There's twice as much UV radiation and 25% more light than at sea level. So that clarity of light actually confuses people's sense of scale. So far away mountains look like they're pretty close and can actually create almost that sense of euphoria that we probably all experience in the alpine, or we wouldn't continue going up there. Mean annual temperature in the alpine is 25 degrees Fahrenheit. Records show temperatures as low as 70 below zero. All of these factors lead to a significantly reduced growing season. So typically that 3 months or less, and create major challenges for flora and fauna that call the alpine home. So life survives at the outer and upper extremes in the alpine environment. And they've been rigorously selected and have adapted to surviving in that harsh environment. Most of those plants can't be taken out of the alpine and grown at lower elevations because they will not survive. These adaptations are what we're going to focus on. So there's only 313 plant species that have adapted to the alpine conditions. You can compare this to the Arctic, where there's around 900 plant species that are known. So only 3% of the world's plants have adapted to alpine conditions. But for those plants, like I said, the alpine is home and they can't exist in warmer, moister environments. So some of those plant adaptations I'm going to rush through are chemical adaptations, short stature, preformation of buds, perennial growth forms, leaf and flower orientation, and dense pubescence. So one that blows my mind all the time are the anthocyanins. So a large portion of the alpine plants are marked by that distinctive red color of the anthocyanin pigments. They range in from reds to blues, so the reds of like red cabbage to the blues of cornflower, depending on whether that plant's sap is red or is acid, which is red, or alkaline, which is blue. As we all know, those pigments are always present and often masked by the greater amounts of chlorophyll. So this alpine avon in these pictures here is a plant that shows very high levels of anthocyanins. Its redness is present mostly in the spring and in the fall. In the springtime, it's before photosynthesis is fully operative in the leaves. And in the fall, it's as a plant is preparing for that long, cold winter. They're a product of the carbohydrates that are stored in the roots from the previous growing season. When the rapid growth begins in the early spring, part of those carbohydrates are incorporated into new plant tissue and part into anthocyanins. So in the photosynthetic tissues of the plant, those anthocyanins act as a sunscreen, protecting the cells from the high light damage by absorbing the blue-green light and protecting the tissues from photoinhibition or high light stress to the plant. And here's the thing that always blows my mind. So those anthocyanins are capable of converting the incidental light rays, even light coming through a thin layer of snow, into heat to warm the plant's tissues. So those plants that are high in anthocyanins endure the cold better. An added bonus is that the red coloration of the leaves may actually camouflage those plants from herbivores that are blind to red wavelengths, or signal unpalatability, since those anthocyanins, as they're being synthesized, they coincide with the formation of unpalatable phenolic compounds. So in the fall, before the leaves fall off and the plant closes up shop, it wants to pull in as much sugar and nutrients as possible to store down in that taproot. The prevailing theory is that the anthocyanins protect the leaves from the excess sunlight and enable that plant to store any last remaining nutrients. Almost all alpine plants are tiny in size. We often say that the best way to enjoy the alpine is to lie on your belly. It's a good way for humans to view these tiny little plants away from the wind. And so wind and pressure actually increases at the heights of humans. And so that environment is colder and windier than down at the ground level where these tiny little plants are growing. The small size is definitely advantageous in that it keeps that plant down, snugged really low to the ground and out of the worst weather. And it requires less energy for the production of the plant tissue or the green part of the plant. The dwarfing actually typically only involves the growth shoots or those green parts of the plants, making the flowers look larger in comparison. So flower buds and alpine plants, large majority of alpine plants, begin early in the previous year's growing season. So a lot of the times when we go through a drought cycle, you'll see that the alpine plants aren't blooming quite as much as in years that follow a wet year, like the one that I think we're about to have. So they are well formed by the end of the summer, those buds stored down in that protective taproot, and then burst through the next year or many years later. So studies of this alpine buttercup pinpointed a cell that eventually gave rise to the yellow flower. It formed the first year, divided many times that second year, formed a bud in the third year, and eventually bloomed in that fourth summer. So by pre-formation of buds, the plants are standing ready to bloom at the first sign of warming temperatures. Early growth is also made possible by all those starches and sugars that are stored as carbohydrates down in this thick taproot that many of the alpine plants have. That root not only stores that carbohydrate, but it also probes for deep water sources and anchors the plant against the constant winds. When the plant is dormant in the winter, those stores are not reduced. The temperatures of warming spring cause the accumulated carbohydrates to be converted for rapid growth. During that period, early spring through maybe 75 to 90% of the plant's growth season, that plant is actually living at a deficit. So it's using those carbohydrates because photosynthesis is not keeping up with its need for energy. And by then that plant growth will slow and the stores are replenished. So by the onset of dormancy in the fall, the underground carbohydrates are back up to their highest level of the year. This actually helps us know when we need to do restoration work, of course, in the spring and fall when the carbohydrate storage is the highest, and may protect that plant and allow it to establish itself even through the stress of being moved. So most alpine plants are perennial. A perennial plant lives more than 2 years. An annual plant has to germinate, produce leaves, stems, flowers, and produce seeds for a new crop of plant within a single season, whereas perennial plants are able to basically just add to what is already there and depend on that stable root system and can survive without flowering if a season is particularly bad. So some alpine plants, like this old man in the mountain or the Hymenopsis grandiflora, live 10 to 15 years before they ever flower. They'll spend that time just producing their leaves and storing those reserves of underground carbohydrate. When enough carbohydrate has accumulated, the floral buds will develop, and the following year that plant blooms, the seeds mature, and the plant dies. Unlike flowers at lower elevations, which are annuals, the alpine sunflower compensates for that short, cold summer by being a long-lived perennial. The Conigia that is shown here is one of the only alpine annuals, and to express just how disadvantaged this plant is, it is currently listed as imperiled in Wyoming, where 6 occurrences have been recorded, Colorado, where 15 occurrences have been recorded, and Montana, where only 4 occurrences have been recorded. So another way that the alpine buttercup improves its chances to survival, I love this one, is by using the intense ultraviolet radiation available in the alpine to its advantage. I mentioned before that the production of viable seeds requires heat. So you can see how shiny its petals are. This amazing little plant is using those little shiny petals to reflect sunlight onto the developing seed and can raise the internal temperature of its flowers 12 to 14 degrees Fahrenheit. It also attracts pollinators, which is beneficial for the production of viable seeds. So the viviparous bistort and also the nodding saxifrage have the potential to reproduce in two different ways. So they have vegetative bulbils along their stalks. You can see on both the saxifraga and the bistorta that they have those bulbils, which can actually fall from the plant and establish themselves immediately. And sometimes they even sprout before they're even shed from the parent plant. You can see that one I picked off of a plant up on Pikes Peak, actually, and it has already sprouted, and it's basically giving live birth. So leaf and flower orientation is really important in the alpine. So there are whole habitats that exist in the alpine called cushion plant communities. They're the perfect example of leaf and flower adaptations that to help exist in those high wind environments. So they are low growing mats. They allow the wind to blow over much as the wind would over an airplane wing. And at the same time, they have maximal exposure of that leaf surface for photosynthesis. Often the temperatures on the interior of these cushion plants are several degrees higher than they are outside of the plant or on the edge of the plant. Their tightly packed branches also cause the plants to catch blown in dirt, and that combined with the old leaves will absorb moisture to hold moisture, and they contribute to soil building and stabilization. So the radial symmetry or rosette growth, like this big rooted spring beauty, may be even less exposing to desiccating winds than a cushion plant, since it can actually lie flatter to the ground. The picture that is shown here is of a plant that is in a wet spell. During a dry spell, that plant will lie so flat against the ground as to only be about 1/4 to a 1/2 inch tall. And that allows them to attain the greatest exposure to light and the least exposure to the cold and wind damage and drying. And these rosettes, actually, the water coming from the roots, it has the shortest possible distance to travel from the root to the leaf tips. You'll also notice that this plant is a succulent. So the waxy surface on the leaves prevents evaporation of the precious moisture. They also have a profusion of interior cells that have a mucilaginous sap and are it's very similar to desert plants like jade or aloe vera. So cushion plants that are 4 inches in diameter are 40 years old and have a 6-foot taproot. So here are some really old cushion plants. These plants are closer to 10 to 12 inches across, making them likely around 100 to 120 years old and probably have a taproot measuring up to 20 feet. Pubescence, the alpine forget-me-not, my favorite alpine plant, is a good example of an alpine plant with dense pubescence. The densely pubescent plants look like they're pale gray, but if you were to strip off that pubescence, they're just as green as any other plant. The hairs are known as pubescence, and they protect the plant's stomata. The stomata is the pores through which the plants breathe. They breathe just like we do. The hairs will also diffuse that strong alpine sunlight and reduce both the intensity and the directness of that sunlight that reaches the leaf surface. So the hairs will allow the intense sunshine to still allow for photosynthesis, but not cause the burning of those cells. So while the hairs reflect that visible light ray, they trap the heat rays, warming the surface of the plant in a greenhouse-like effect. And when the alpine forget-me-not is in bud, that bud looks like a little elfin earmuff. Because of that furriness, the alpine forget-me-not is one of the earliest flowering plants at very high elevations. So some alpine plants like the alpine poppy, which is one of our track species, have dark hair on their bud, which absorbs even more heat than the white hairs. And that warming helps to that developing flower within in those seeds. So the Rocky Mountains potentially harbor many more plant species than we know about. They are unraveling the genetic codes and genetic sequencing to find plants like this, the funky thistle. Socium funkiae was formally named in 2022. And while it is, other alpine plants have adapted to the extreme environment by being that low dwarfed plant, this thistle has taken a different approach. The thistles produce dense woolly hairs that surround the flowers. This helps to protect the flowers from the harsh cold conditions, and they actually provide food for insect pollinators and pica. So there are tons of non-flowering plants in the alpine. Lichens and mosses and club mosses have minimal requirements for survival. They can actually survive without photosynthesis occurring for many years. They are formed by a fungus and an alga. The fungus forms the tough outer exterior layers, while the algal cells do the photosynthesis and provide the food for the plants. They can absorb way more than their own weight in water. Some resources say 35 times their weight in water in a rainstorm or from heavy dew. And any of you who have walked across a densely lichened talus slope after a rainstorm know just how slick these babies can get. And that's from all that moisture being held in them. They are at huge risk from climate change. New studies say that the alga parts of the common lichens can't adapt to the temperature changes as fast as the earth is warming. Scientists found that the alga can take hundreds of thousands of years to adapt to the changing temperatures that we expect to see over the course of this century. So they are at dire trouble when it comes to climate change. Mosses too are sponge-like, so you can see the moss under the non-flowering plants label is tightly bound to its stems. That's during a dry spell, and then it opens up to absorb all that moisture during a wet spell. So they're all non-vascular plants. They absorb water and nutrients through their leaves and harvest carbon dioxide and sunlight to create food through photosynthesis. They are they reproduce by spores and not seeds, and they have no flowers. So have you ever noticed this lichen out on the mountains? It's called map lichen. It grows about 3/8 of an inch every 1,000 years. So in a moraine that's 10,000 years old, these lichens are about 3 inches across. So grasses and sedges are common in the alpine. They have narrow leaves and stems, not likely to be torn by those alpine winds. They are also reduced to the essentials. The flowers don't have any bright petals or cup sepals. They're just reproductive parts enclosed in a simple protective envelope. So alpine fauna, the animals and insects and birds that have adapted also to the harsh alpine climate, their life cycles are stretched over several seasons. Larval stages are often over several summers. Litters and broods are severely reduced, often to one. and maturation occurs at a quickened rate. So insects. Black flies, mosquitoes, grasshoppers, insects are extremely important as pollinators in the tundra, especially flies. At lower elevations, bees are the primary pollinators, but bees are immobilized at temperatures below 50 degrees Fahrenheit. With their lower energy requirements and ability to work under really restricted conditions, flies are very important. Have any of you seen reptiles and amphibians in the alpine? Well, there aren't many and they don't stay long. The summer is so short and the temperature is so cold that cold-blooded reptiles and amphibians usually can't live there. During the summer, you might find a rare terrestrial garter snake or tiger salamander, but that's pretty rare. So birds, the number of birds in the alpine is relatively small. Most birds live there only during the short alpine summer. The broadtail hummingbird drinks the nectar from the many flowers. The white-crowned sparrow and other small birds eat the seeds produced by the alpine plants and grasses. The wide open meadows make it easy for golden eagles to soar in the wind and hunt for animals during that short summer. The American dipper bobs in and out of those alpine streams, looking for insects and freshwater shrimp. But this is the only bird that lives in the tundra all year. Adult ptarmigan will set out a storm in relative security by joining together so that little heat is lost from their bodies. During the winter, their legs and feet are so heavily feathered that they look like they're wearing pantaloons. It gives them both warmth for their feet and snowshoes to cross the snow. So everybody loves this one. How many ptarmigan can you find? There's at least 4. These are likely females or young. The male ptarmigan are very territorial, and their territories are typically between 10 and 20 acres in size. So their defense mechanism, ptarmigan defense mechanism, is camouflage, and their natural predators in the alpine are birds of prey who hunt by sight. So because these ground nesting birds will stand still when they feel threatened, they are easy prey for off-leash dogs. So here are some photos of a ptarmigan nest and an American pipit nest. If you look closely at the American pipit nest, you can see 3 tiny little pipit eggs. A ptarmigan hen will lay 1 egg per day for up to 11 days. She will wait until all the eggs have been laid, and then she will start incubation, ensuring that the chicks all hatch simultaneously. So how exposed do you think these are to off-leash dogs? Very. So bighorn sheep, elk, and mountain goats are regulars on the alpine tundra. Even these mammals will only remain in the above tree line in the winter if they're forced to, because grazing opportunities are pretty limited. So there's no evidence that mountain goats inhabited Colorado during historic times. Most authorities would consider mountain goats to be an introduced species in Colorado. They're very sure-footed and agile. They live on rocky cliffs, rocky ridges, precipitous cliffs, and high alpine tundra. Their feet are, their hooves are adapted to those rugged slopes by being very, very flexible, almost like rubber, so they can jump from rock to rock. They're herbivores. They have thick white fur to keep them warm in the winter. They will shed one of those layers during the summer. They reside on the steep mountains, and that is not without risk, as mountain goats are often killed by avalanches, especially in the late winter. The skeleton of a mountain goat is arranged such that all 4 of its hooves can fit on a ledge that is 6 inches long by 2 inches wide. That's smaller than the size of a dollar bill. So mountain goats are not goats. They are more closely related to antelope and are part of the Bovidae family. Males are called billies, females are called nannies, babies are called kids. Their social groupings change seasonally. During the winter, they will all live together in large groups. During the summer, the males get kicked out. The males are only dominant during the breeding season. Otherwise, the females are dominant. Their hierarchies are developed very early by the kids in their playful behavior. The stronger dominant kids will become leaders of their groups. They have very sharp horns that can puncture the sides of other goats, and they are known to be pretty aggressive towards bighorn sheep. They can also be pretty aggressive towards humans, so I suggest that you keep your distance, or they'll help yourself to your food, and they are greatly enticed by the salts in your urine, so try to urinate on rock rather than on vegetation, which they will destroy to get to those salts. So suitable bighorn habitat is the same as those as the mountain sheep, mountain goats, sorry. Broken terrain, they like to have escape cover. They will go out and browse for a little while and then rush back onto those protected areas to digest their foods. Their digestive system does act as a survival mechanism. They have a very complex 4-part stomach, which allows them to gain important nutrients from hard, dry forage. They'll eat large amounts of vegetation, quickly escape back to their cliffs or ledges where they can thoroughly rechew and digest their food. Adult males will gain full curl of their horns at about 7 to 8 years of age. The lambs are born in April through July, with the peak time in late May. So they are getting ready to have those babies, and I hope it stops snowing at some point. A single lamb is the norm. The ewes will usually live to be 10 to 12 years old. Rams seem to have a somewhat higher mortality rate, and that might have something to do with their bighorn headbutt fights. In the fall, the rams will compete for ewes by having butting contests. They charge at each other at speeds of more than 20 miles per hour, their foreheads crashing with a crack that can be heard up to a mile away. Those battles can sometimes last as long as 24 hours. The adult male bighorn horns can weigh 30 pounds, which is more than all the bones of his body combined. Bighorns are now listed as sensitive species in the Rocky Mountain region. The development of Colorado's high country is increasingly blocking the bighorn's migratory paths and weakening the herds by denying them the genetic diversity. So there is a great goats and sheep video that is through Banff National Park. I highly suggest watching it. It gives you a good idea of the difference between goat and sheep. Small mammals are significantly more present in the alpine year-round. They survive the winter by storing massive quantities of food or hibernation and incessant hunting. So pika, we all love our pika. They're small members of the rabbit family. Their ears have diminished in size to the small round ones that are not as likely to freeze. So tails, ears, and other extremities of animals that live in cold environments are often reduced or missing. They have fur on the soles of their feet that work as a non-skid device, much like your skins on your cross-country skis will work. And they aid in purchase on precipitous rocks and also help to keep them warm. In order to obtain maximal food value, pika are, like rabbits, able to re-ingest their fecal matter, which is high in protein content and energy value. They preserve body moisture in dry climates by depositing almost crystalline uric acid, leaving that white nitrogenous salt deposit that you'll see on boulder surfaces up where the pika are prominent. Pika female will give birth to a litter in the spring. She will immediately mate again. And if that first litter doesn't survive due to predation or cold or disease, she will deliver the second. If that first litter does survive, her body reabsorbs those fetuses. So the dens are discovered by those Lilliputian haystacks that you can see under the rocks. Pika will begin preparing the food for the winter by mid-July, and they will continue until all available food is snow-covered. Their vegetarian diet is not very high in calories, and they must fill their stomach almost hourly to meet their energy needs. Pika have been observed to be active during every month of the year, so there's no evidence that they hibernate. And they need to have enough food stored to fill their stomachs hourly for 9 or 10 months. And do you remember me talking about the anthocyanins? Well, here's the rest of that story. The pika will collect inordinate amounts of the alpine avens. You can see in this picture that pika actually has alpine avens in his mouth, but they are actually poisonous to the pika while they are green, and that phenolics compound makes them unpalatable for the pika. But they actually help to prevent mold and bacterial growth in the food stores. So they will layer layers of the alpine avens in with their other food sources, and once they are dry, they are no longer poisonous to the pika. That protect those stores. They're very sensitive to warm temperatures and are thought to select talus habitats to provide that cool refuge. Increasing summer temperatures may be particularly dangerous to the pika. If they are exposed to temperatures above 78 degrees Fahrenheit, it is lethal. They can regulate their temperature by resting under the talus, but increasing temperatures can reduce their ability to collect enough vegetation to survive through the winter. And it also reduces the juveniles' ability to leave the talus where they were born to find territory of their own. Where humans can withstand body temperature increases of 8 degrees Fahrenheit, pika body temperature increases of 2 to 3 degrees are fatal. Marmots, like ptarmigans, are relatively large animals. They're relatives of woodchucks. They eat themselves fat in the summer and hibernate in a communal hibernation burrow all winter, with body temperatures of that communal group sinking to less than 40 degrees. Their hearts will beat once per minute, and they breathe once every 3 to 6 minutes. They survive solely on their fat reserves for 8 to 9 months. They emerge in the spring, sprawl out on those warm rocks in a blissful enjoyment of the sunshine and warmth, just like we're about to do if the sun ever shines up here. So although these plants and animals have adapted well to the harsh environment, they have not adapted to the presence of human, and especially the large numbers who seek out the 14ers. This is why you received this presentation. I don't know how many times you have or will hear somebody say, the trail's slick, I'm going to walk over here on the grass. You now know that that grass is not like the grass that we have in our neighborhood parks. Those plants, insects, and animals live at the outer and upper extremes in the alpine environment because they've been rigorously selected and adapted, but they have not adapted to the presence of human. As few as 5 footsteps in a single location is enough to kill the alpine plants. Once the vegetation is destroyed, so is the alpine ecosystem. We need to recognize that we are visiting their homes and take care not to destroy it. As Terry Tempest Williams says, the eyes of the future are looking back at us, and they are praying for us to see beyond our own time. So ask people to stay on the trails, the brown stuff. Don't pee on the green stuff. Keep your distance from wildlife. Keep your dogs on a leash. Never feed the wildlife. Keep your voice low. And if you have to listen to music, please wear earphones so others can experience the joys of nature. Carry out your own waste and your dog's waste from the alpine environment. I think the plants and animals have enough to deal with. And in the words of the Lorax, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not.
Thank you, Loretta. That's always so mind-blowing. I mean, I think we're all here because we care about these places, and then you learn about the adaptations and you're just like, what? And it's really motivating. It's really inspiring for me. I mean, I've heard this presentation a few times, and I feel like I learn something every year that just makes me want to protect these places even more. I mean, I grew up in Oregon. We didn't have the alpine or much of the alpine, and when I came out here and learned about it, I was like, yeah, this is really cool and worth protecting. So if you can make her alpine ecology class we're going to do in July, you won't regret it, I know. And I will send a link, a sign up link for that if you want to join. I know this is so much to pack into 2 hours. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate your time today and letting us go over the basics and learning about the Peak Steward program. Yeah, I guess I'll dismiss the class. If anyone wants to stay on and ask questions, we'll be here for a little while. And for everyone else, again, thank you for being here today, and I'll be in touch with more information and all those resources. And we'll kick off the field season soon, and I can't wait.
Joan has a
Thank
question.
you.
I do. I have a question. This has happened
Yeah.
twice. Once, we were at Bierstadt twice within a very short period of time, and we noticed some stuff at the trailhead, people that left stuff, water bottles and mittens and things like that. And then we went back, and then they're still there. We saw a bunch of stuff up on Grace Peak too. Do we leave them or do we take them away?
Take them. I
Okay,
never leave anything on Grace and Torrey's. If you open that old registration box, it will be packed with stuff. And I
Okay.
know that, you know, people are helping us by cleaning up stuff that they find up on the mountains, but most people aren't going to come back for that. If it's
Yeah.
something of big value, like somebody's cell phone, you
Right.
might drop it off at the Forest Service office down there in you'll probably have to do it at Idaho Springs at the visitor center and get that to the Forest Service office where they can secure it and keep it for a period of time.
I have to tell Hannah something? I'm not making cookies anymore, but you see this little guy? I found it at REI and I had to have it, and I take it up there now. And it attracts mostly the kids, and the kids they are the best audience for teaching them about the pika and everything. It's a great attractor of questions.
That is so great. I love that, Joan. And Jenna Yeager, who's retired Forest Service, and she's been a Peak Steward for a while, she has a stuffed, I think it's a marmot, and she uses it in a very similar way, but she's found even the adults love it too. 'Cause she'll take it to like outreach events and they can pick it up and whatnot. But it's like there's just something so great about having a cute, fuzzy little stuffy for people to squeeze and talk about. So
And the
great
kids,
technique.
the kids love the pica and the marmot stickers too,
Yep.
more than any of the other ones. They love those.
I agree. And I was just going to add too about the comment about the things that you find at the trailhead. I was going to mention this earlier, but didn't. No one is required to pick up trash at all. If you don't want to pick up dog poop bags, You know, you're there for hiker education. But I always do it. I take multiple types of gloves with me. You know, I have trail gloves, warm gloves, and, you know, the latex plastic gloves. And I pick up trash constantly, but it is not necessarily in your job description if you don't want to do that. But you know, it's a great thing to do, and we appreciate you if you do. Because you could spend the whole day picking up trash sometimes, depending on where you go. So yeah. Are there other questions from anyone? All right.
I might have missed it,
Yeah.
but I remember there being in previous years a book suggestion, which I foolishly did not write down, for alpine ecology.
So I think both of them are in the Peak Steward manual on resources. There's a picture, and I think it's toward the end in the appendix. And it has this one, Song of the Alpine, and then what's the other one called, Loretta?
Land Above the Trees by
Yeah.
Anne Swinger. So this,
I think they're both
this
in
is
there.
more technical. It has a lot more information, goes really in deep, and this can be any alpine, not just Colorado alpine. Whereas Joyce really focused on Colorado alpine in the Song of the Alpine.
Sweet. Thank you. Thank you.
Loretta, were you saying that map lichen is thousands of years old?
Yeah, isn't that crazy? 3/8 of an inch in 1,000 years.
That is insane. I mean, we always, as trail builders, try to put the lichen side out, and now I'm going to try even harder.
Right?
That is just incredible.
Yeah, I know. That was a new one that I found, new information that I found.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, really? That's
Yep.
crazy. So when you're hiking along a like a lateral moraine, you can actually determine how long that moraine has been sitting there by the size of the lichens. So a 3-inch lichen in those areas is 10,000 years.
Wow. That's really, really something. I mean, the cushion plants always gets me, that they're hundreds of years old. And then I see people standing on them sometimes, and I'm like, oh no, there's four plant. But yeah, the lichen information, that was really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, we don't think of lichens as being so sensitive because they're tough, right?
Yep.
They're tough looking things, but we can do a lot of damage to the lichens up on
Yeah.
the mountains, you know, whether it's when we're doing construction work or even people just hiking along the same route. Yeah, the
Right.
lichens definitely are impacted.
Mm-hmm.
We always say walk on the rocks, you know, and of course the rocks are covered in lichen. But you know, we do the best we can.
That is exactly what I thought. I was like, where do I tell people to stand?
On the rocks.
Yeah. It's
And
like
also
the
pee on
best.
them.
Yeah. Don't pee on the lichen, please. It's very old. Yeah, that might be a little too much for some people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, well, should we go forth and enjoy our day and, you know, celebrate our mothers this weekend, or Mother Earth and their other mothers?
And those of us in the mountains can enjoy this snow that is dumping down on us.
Yeah. Yeah, let me know when it's all gone. We'll come do some trail work up there.
Okay. Yeah, July.
Yeah. Yep. Good. All right. Well, yeah, if Loretta and Vaughn would just stay on for a sec, and then I'll see everyone soon. And I can't wait to see you again.
Bye.
Bye-bye.